This desert road leads us to what many see as the twilight zone of the Holy Land, the West Bank. A place separated and divided by different administrations and populations. It is indeed a complicated area for the living, but what about the life that was? Today we take a tour with Benny Har-Even, Deputy Manager at the Civil Administration Archaeology Unit.
This area of Judea and Samaria is one of the most significant places for the development of humanity, and not just for the development of land of Israel. We can see here the cradle of agriculture, the development of the main Abrahamic faiths. All these things are parts of the big mosaic of history that is buried here in this ground. Every detail has its place in this history. We are against covering or hiding these details of the other.
Our first visit is the ancient site of Archelaus, named after Herod Archelaus, son of Herod the Great, who built this city in the 1st century BCE. Archelaus was a major city at that time. It is mentioned by Josephus in his book Antiquities of the Jews, and also appears on the famous Madaba map of the early Byzantine era.
Archelaus built here water cisterns and turns this dry desert site into an oasis, a paradise. Over here you can see the tower, and over there is Archelaus' palace they built for himself and for his ancestors. And across this area, there are more private houses and public structures that he also built. During the Byzantine era, this place was repopulated, and we can see that during this time they built a lavish church alongside this great big city.
But according to Har-Even, the difficulty of excavating this site is twofold. The place stands in the buffer zone, as part of it is under Israeli control and part under Palestinian control. Har-Even says he sees vandalism, looting, and even massive building on the Palestinian side.
By the time we finished excavating, we had turned this place into an archaeological garden. You can see here that the place was severely vandalized. We see a massive construction area A, and here we can see a grave robbery that was carried out over the years, which has damaged many, many layers of the site. All the walls stood very nicely, everything was very well preserved, and they just came deliberately and destroyed the walls. The whole compound was surrounded by a fence, but they kept digging and pushing and taking things. We are not giving up. We'll continue to work here and preserve the site until it returns to be a place that we can put on a display for the entire public.
Our next stop is the Hasmonean Royal Winter Palaces complex. It is one of the most important sites from the Hasmonean period of the 2nd century BCE. Built by Yohanan Horkanos, this lavish compound served the last Jewish dynasty, which controlled the Holy Land until the creation of Israel in 1948.
Here we have some major remains, like a Jewish bathhouse, a synagogue, perhaps one of the most ancient synagogues that was discovered here in Israel, swimming pools which are part of the luxurious lifestyle of the royal family, a large industry district, and we also have Herod's Palace. After Herod came to power, he arrived and continued to develop the area. He built the 2nd and 3rd palaces, which were considered top architectural achievements at the time.
The other side of Herod's compound is across the valley, under Palestinian control. It has one of the most interesting remains in the area, the so-called Sunken Garden, an ornamental garden with magnificent remains from the time of Herod. According to Har-Even, this site is highly neglected and destroyed by local Palestinian construction.
We turned to the Palestinian authorities and we got different responses. They said they were taking care of it, but at the end of the day, nothing happened. The destruction continues and the damage is just irreversible.
As opposed to archaeological sites in Israel, which are under the Israeli Antiquities Authority, the body in charge of archaeology in the West Bank is the Civil Administration, which is part of a larger entity called Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories. The 1954 Hague Convention says that in the event of occupation, the occupying state is under obligation to support as much as possible the relevant authorities of the occupied country in safeguarding and preserving its cultural property. But in this small piece of land, it's hard to know who is in charge, and precious evidence of history finds itself between a rock and a hard place.